Hey guys, Argent here with a reactionary review of Wanted. So I just rewatched this movie last night. My dad was watching it and he was like 10 minutes in, and I said, well, I might as well rewatch it. I haven't seen this movie since it came out way back in 2008, so 8 years ago I haven't seen it since, so I might as well watch this movie again. Um, it seems like it would be a good film to do a reactionary review of, given the subject matter. Now this movie is really weird. It's kind of got a strange plot pacing. It's got a lot of just odd things about it. I think part of why it's weird is because it's kind of comic booky, but kind of not. Like parts of the movie seem like it's from a comic book, but other parts really don't. And it's kind of this awkward tension. I mean, it's not like something like most of the Frank Miller movies, which are clearly taken directly from a comic book. Albeit, I think most of those suck, but that's beside the point. And it's not like something like Spider-Man, which is based on a comic book, but really doesn't feel like a comic book at all. It's a lot more kind of a serious movie. And this film kind of is in the uncanny valley between that. Now, my understanding is this has absolutely nothing to do with the comic, which was created by what was his name? Mark Miller. Mark Miller is an interesting figure. I kind of think I've had mixed feelings about him. Apparently, he's very like a very devout Catholic, but he also just produces the he does not use profanity in his personal life. Um, so I don't know. I can't tell with his work if it's supposed to be satirical, like if it's supposed to be mocking the nihilism of modern society or reveling in it. I also can't tell if he's really right wing or really left wing. He's a bit like Frank Miller. Like Mark Miller is ironically like Frank Miller. Like Frank Miller sometimes seems like he's a fascist and sometimes seems like he's far left. I can't really place him. Alan Moore claims to be um, far left, but some of his work, probably because he doesn't understand how the right works, seems to be right wing. But Mark Miller just produces the most disgustingly, just like brutal, profane, degenerate works I've ever seen. The comic book of Wanted is so degenerate. I haven't really been able to read it, and that's very rare because if you notice, I review R-rated and like extremely gory movies all the time. But it just looks too degenerate. So this doesn't really have anything to do with the comic book, which I think is a good thing. Because I don't think you could film the comic book. I think the comic book would be like would get NC-17 if you made it legitimate. I don't even know if it could be released because of like the child prostitution and stuff in it. But yeah, so it's a freaking weird movie. Is it good or bad? It's not really good or bad. It kind of comes across as being mediocre. I felt the movie just kind of felt like it wasn't really finished. Let me just look at this. How long was this film? 110 minutes, and yet it felt very short. I guess because there's a lot of just stuff they threw in here with the international assassins. We had kind of some Matrix elements. We had bullet curving. We had all these kind of weapons. We just had all kinds of like weird stuff that wasn't really explored in that much depth. The main character is also not really likable. Actually, no one in this is really likable, and that's kind of something I find very common with Mark Miller stuff. Most of the characters are just kind of unlikable. I'll have to do a review of Kick-Ass 2. Kick-Ass 2 was literally like the worst viewing experience I've ever had in theaters, with the possible exception of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but we're getting off topic. So our movie opens with Wesley Gibson in Chicago. He works a shitty dead-end desk job with a crappy boss. If I ever publish No Chance, his boss is very similar to the main character's boss in that. She's kind of a fat, middle-aged feminist who never got married, who just uses her small amount of power to make his life a living hell and to just make fun of him and just to verbally abuse him, which I find female bosses often are like. He has an unfaithful live-in girlfriend who cheats on him with his friend and colleague Barry, who's played by Chris Pratt. Now, I actually like Chris Pratt. He plays kind of the cocky, swaggering douchebag pretty well. Pratt is actually very devout Christian in his personal life. He will, generally speaking, refuse to do sex scenes in movies because he says it's a form of adultery. So Chris Pratt, I think he's a funny actor. I do like him. So yeah, so his boyfriend, so his girlfriend is cheating on him with his best friend. There's even a scene where they're at a pharmacy and his friend loses his wallet. So he gets Wesley to pay for the condoms that he's going to use to fuck his girlfriend. So he's literally paying for his own cucking. So that's kind of how much of a loser he is, and he just has like the most pathetic life possible. Now the thing is, this is very similar to the life that most people have. This is kind of partially why the NEAT phenomenon exists, because people don't want to work shitty dead end jobs, excessive numbers of hours a week, have shitty overbearing feminist bosses who treat them like trash, have no hope of career advancement, and have kind of trashy women, if they have relationships at all, who cheat on them or accuse them of rape or get divorced and take all their assets. Um, Combine that with high taxes, etc., it's no real wonder that a lot of men opt to just not get married and not enter a career. Because, like, think about it, his life is not improved in any way by working for a living. So, um, he also takes anti-anxiety medication for a series of panic attacks, which I think is something a lot of us can relate to. I don't think it's antidepressants. I think it's some form of benzodiazepine or tranquilizer. So, while at a pharmacy, he's told by a woman named Fox, Angelina Jolie. Now, just to comment on Angelina Jolie, I don't understand why people find her attractive. She looks like a lizard to me. I remember when someone was explaining like the whole reptilian conspiracy theory to me. I'm like, well, if you're talking about Angelina Jolie, I could believe that she's some sort of reptilian, like that she's like half snake or something. I find her completely like disgusting to look at, and that kind of is a big problem with this movie because she's supposed to be kind of the sexy older woman who takes him under her wing. But I just find her completely visually unappealing. Actually, the point it makes me nauseous. Part of it's also supposed to be she's supposed to be like hotter than his girlfriend, but his girlfriend's this really pretty blonde who's just much better looking than her, and it makes the scene later make no sense. So she tells him at the pharmacy as he's picking up his next round of anti-anxiety medication that his murdered father was actually an assassin, and the killer is a man named Cross, who's now hunting Wesley. Cross shows up, and Fox and Cross engage in a Fox Cross engage in a shootout with high-tech guns, including like one of those corner shooting things. Wesley panics and runs into the parking lot. We have a bunch of action scenes. Uh, Fox is able to get away, and they execute a spectacular escape. So Wesley awakens in the headquarters of the fraternity, a secret society of assassins. The group's leader is Sloane, played by Morgan Freeman, or Morgan I Gotta Eat Freeman, who plays the same character in every fucking movie. Like, seriously, he plays the same character in this that he plays in, I'm trying to remember what the other movies are that recently he's in. Transcendence, the same character he plays in everything. He's always like the older, the same character he was in Oblivion, kind of the older statesman, the guy who like leads the organization, the guy who's kind of like the wise old man mentor figure. He just always plays it. He's in every movie regardless of quality, and I'm sick of looking at him. Not that he's a bad actor, it's just tired. So he tells Wesley that his panic attacks are actually the untrained expression of a rare ability, which allows him to move in bullet time. Yes, bullet time is an inheritable thing in this, which I guess is like okay. The problem is, why do all the other assassins have superhuman abilities, if only Wesley and his father had that ability? I know it's never really explained. They like have some matrixy shit later where it turns out that you can curve bullets. Like they can like I don't know, they twist their gun and the bullet can like curve around stuff, and they can use like heat-seeking bullets. and they can do stuff like deflect bullets with knives, and there's really no explanation for any of this. Like, I'm willing to buy that there's some sort of like mystical assassin power, like they go through some ritual because they're servants of fate, and fate gives them abilities beyond normal men. But that's never really established. I guess they just somehow gain Jedi-like powers through a couple weeks of training. So let's see here. So Sloane wants to teach him to control the ability and become an assassin. Wesley initially doesn't want to and returns to his former life. The next morning, he discovers his bank account now contains millions of dollars inherited from his father. The discovery changes his view of life. He's now no longer a wage slave. He's now no longer dependent upon his crappy job to sustain himself. So he basically goes in, tells his boss to go fuck herself. Um, in public, he picks up his keyboard and smashes his cheating friend in the face with it. Wesley then goes and finds Fox waiting outside, and they go back to the fraternity. Wesley is trained. It begins his training and is shown the loom of fate, which gives the names of targets that the assassins are supposed to kill to maintain the balance through the errors in the fabric. I guess it's a reference to like the Norns, and they're like weaving the fabric of fate. It's kind of a bit literal. Only Sloane can see and interpret the messages, although Wesley's later able to do it. He's initially reluctant to kill someone, but Fox tells a big story about how her father was a judge who was trying to bring down some mafiosos, and the mafiosos hired a hitman to kill her father, and they killed her father and tortured her. However, her father would have been saved had an assassin. Sorry about that. Killed the hitman because the hitman's name had come up in the Loom of Fate. Loom of Fate, and the assassin had refused to kill him, allowing the guy to kill her father. So Fox is blindly loyal to the to fate. So they have a couple missions. Wesley leaves his girlfriend. He catches her with his former friend. He punches him in the face, and Fox makes out with him in front of his girlfriend as a way of making her jealous. Except his girlfriend's way hotter than Fox, and Fox was born without a personality. It's just kind of condescending and quiet, so it doesn't really make sense. Like half this movie is a freaking training montage where Wesley just gets beat up. He gets trained how to fight with knives. He gets shot a couple times. The assassins just seem to be sadistic. They just kind of shoot him. They go and they get corpse. Kind of gross. Um, but I guess that's how their training works. And they introduce like this ex machina, which is this like substance that instantly heals you. You like go into a coma in this tub of water, and this substance hardens around you and it heals your wounds, which allows them to repeatedly fatally injure Wesley. So you get this huge training montage, and you're like, who cares? Wesley's kind of boring. I guess that's by design. I guess this whole thing's supposed to be a power fantasy. It doesn't really succeed though. The assassins are kind of assholes. Wesley doesn't really throw himself fully into the life, at least not until later. He doesn't really have a relationship with Fox, and she's ugly as sin, anyways. So I don't know. As a power fantasy, I just felt like they were trying, but it didn't really succeed. Not in kind of the way Breaking Bad did. So let's see here. So Wesley gets shot by Cross. Um, Cross shoots Wesley in the shoulder. And they find out that the bullet was manufactured by some guy who lives in Switzerland. So that's the only link to Cross. So they go to Switzerland to talk to the bullet maker, who's played by Malcolm I Gotta Eat McDowell, who's in fucking every movie. Anytime he can get a paycheck. And he sets up a meeting with Cross. They meet on a train, and they have a shootout which destroys the train and kills hundreds of people, which they react to with mild concern. There's a shootout, and Wesley finally kills Cross, who says, "Wesley, I am your father." And Wesley goes, "No!" And then it turned up that Wesley's name came up in the loom of fate, and Fox tries to kill him. Wesley succeeds in escaping and wakes up back in New York to find out that Malcolm McDowell was working for his father the whole time, and that his father had creepily watched him grow up in Wesley's apartment with a telescope. Why his father never did anything to help Wesley along, why his father never gave him money, why his father never paid for his education with his millions of dollars, or tried to get him a better normal life, is completely left open to interpretation. Wesley had never met his father prior to a week ago. He knows nothing about him. I don't think his mother's ever really mentioned. Um, it's just this large kind of portion of the movie you're just supposed to take at face value. That he cared about his son, but he never did anything to help him because he wanted a different life for him. He wanted him to work a shitty dead-end job, which I guess is kind of a thing on the baby boomers where a lot of them lived kind of high, but their kids are going to live much worse lives than themselves. I don't know, the whole thing doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It kind of seems like a plot twist that's just put in. My understanding it's in the comic. I don't really see a reason for it to be in this movie. I guess to give him a reason to fight against the fraternity. Um, so he's told by Malcolm McDowell that Sloane's name had come up in the loom of fate, and Cross was going to carry out the assassination. So Sloane rigged the loom to spit out Cross's name because Cross was the only one who was loyal to the code. And then Cross has been fabricating targets, and they've shifted from just killing whoever the loom tells them to kill, to whoever. So they go from whoever the loom tells them to kill to whoever pays them the most. So the assassins have become much larger. They have a lot more money, a lot more resources at their disposal. Um, so Malcolm McDowell tells Wesley to run away and save himself. Wesley doesn't really seem to care much. He's like, no, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get revenge for my father. So he comes up with a bunch of big plans. He discovers all his father's weapons and his father's plan to take them down. So basically, he gets tens of thousands of rats from a junkyard. Then he puts explosives on all of them and releases them into fraternity headquarters, which devastates it. Then we have a big action scene where he runs in and kills most of the members of the fraternity. They're down to about a dozen in Sloane's office. So he reveals Sloane's deception to those present in the room, and Sloane reveals that all the assassins' names have come up in the weaving, and that he acted to protect them. He gives the members a choice: kill themselves per the code or kill Wesley. The members decide to break the code and kill Wesley, but Fox, who believes more in the code, turns on her fellow assassins and magically curves a bullet that kills everyone but Sloane and Wesley, including herself. During all the mayhem, the loom of fate is destroyed and Sloane manages to escape. Wesley is left penniless once again, and later on, at the end of the movie, we cut to Wesley's desk. Sloane appears and points a gun at the back of the man's head. The man turns around and is revealed to be a decoy. Sloane is killed by Wesley using a long-distance bullet. Wesley states his accomplishments, fulfilling his power fantasy, saying, "This is me taking control from Sloane, from the fraternity, from Janice, from billing reports, from ergonomic keyboards, from treating girlfriends and sack of shit best friends. This is me taking back control of my life," and ask the audience, "What the fuck have you done lately?" Breaking the fourth wall. So I guess it's supposed to be like a... I think the whole movie is supposed to be basically a power fantasy. Like, isn't this what you would want to have happen to you? And this is kind of the issue, because it's almost kind of a deconstruction of power fantasies, but it also kind of plays it straight. Because it's by him saying, "What the fuck have you done lately?" He's saying, "Yeah, I've taken power." but at the same time, we have thousands of people who have died in basically a petty internal spat. We have the death of Wesley's father. We have the death of the assassins who more or less maintained power in the world, and we have the death of Wesley's ambiguous love interest. So amidst all the suffering and death, can we really say that this was like played straight? At the same time, it's portrayed as Wesley says, "What the fuck have you done lately? I'm having a great life now." So he seems to like it. So I don't really know. I mean, the whole movie is just kind of a mess of different concepts, different kind of visual styles, different kind of action styles, and different plot elements, many of which aren't really developed. It kind of reminds me a lot of John Wick, which felt like it was part of a wider universe as this does, but isn't really, I guess. Um, like it feels like it's part of a some sort of I don't know, uh bigger universe that's not really explored. Like John Wick just introduced a whole bunch of stuff that I felt like really wasn't explored in any context. It's kind of similar to with Wanted. So Wanted's an okay movie. It's kind of an attempt to have a power fantasy, but I think it fails at that. I think it kind of fails at just being a pure action movie. It's just kind of an ambiguous mess of a film. That's not to say it's a bad movie, but it really feels like a film that could have been a lot better with better direction and a better script. Metacritic gave it a 64%. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 72. I think that's about right. It's about a 6.5 out of 10, which is it's just kind of frustrating because there's movies that are bad, there's movies that are good, and there's movies that could have been made a lot better with some minimal effort. And this one really belongs to the latter. So I hope you enjoyed the review. This is Argent Templar signing out.